We all knew that once Texas State made it official they were leaving the Sun Belt to join the Pac-12, that the Sun Belt would not stay at 13 schools for long, so they would totally have to add somebody. That news came in just a little bit ago, and they'd be filling Texas State's spot with Louisiana Tech. The Bulldogs will pay a $5 million buyout to the conference and join the Sun Belt starting in 2026, and this is a move that's pretty controversial actually. You'd think it wouldn't be, but there were some other schools that some fans in the conference would rather have, and there's actually some pretty bad blood between Tech and some of the other schools that are in the Sun Belt. In today's video, we're going to talk about how Louisiana Tech football is on the move, how all this happened, their fit in the conference, and my overall thoughts. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and talk about Louisiana Tech football. I think most of us thought that the majority of the effects of conference realignment would only be felt in the bigger conferences, but ever since the moves of Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC were announced, it has actually been the smaller conferences that have been taking the biggest hits. We've seen the America eat half of Conference USA, forcing them to add a bunch of schools from the FCS, and then we saw the Mountain West lose all their best schools to the newly formed Pac-12, and in the MAC, which has really been left alone in realignment for what feels like the last 20 years. They added UMass and lost Northern Illinois. Things are honestly just really crazy right now, and this move also is. I'm going to start off this video talking about Louisiana Tech and the Sun Belt and the history between the two teams, because this actually isn't the first time the Bulldogs have been in the Sun Belt. They were actually members of the conference from 1991 to 2001, but they were not members for all sports because the Sun Belt didn't have a football league at the time. During that time, their football team was independent, but also played in the Big West Conference with a bunch of teams from California and even Northern Illinois for a bit before it all fell apart. They wanted to stay a Western school though, and in 2001 they left the Sun Belt and moved all of their schools from the Sun Belt to the WAC, and that was interesting. When they did that, their athletic director at the time was pretty rude to the Sun Belt. When the conference was just trying to start a football league, they wanted to add UCF and Louisiana Tech, but the Bulldogs thought their chances to grow were better out west, and that caused UCF to not accept their offer. There was a scheduling disagreement between Tech and UL Lafayette, and some people say that caused a lot of bad blood between the two schools that isn't quite over yet. It's also pretty well believed that Tech refused to play UL Monroe in the 2008 Independence Bowl, and Tech didn't end up playing the Raging Cajuns until they joined Conference USA. Louisiana fans ultimately hate Tech. But, of course, Conference USA's recent loss of UTEP and all the new FCS schools joining made the conference less valuable, and the Sun Belt would continue to grow stronger. With Texas State gone, the conference needed to add another school to keep numbers even. Most Sun Belt fans, though, wanted the conference to add Western Kentucky. The Hilltoppers had been members of the Sun Belt over 10 years ago, but left to join Conference USA because the league looked a little bit better than the Sun Belt at the time. The reason why fans wanted WKU though was because most of the members of the Sun Belt are now located in the southeast and not the Louisiana, Texas area. It would make travel easier for the majority of this conference, and adding Tech only makes travel easier for Arkansas State, UL Monroe, and Louisiana, and the two Louisiana schools could really care less about playing Tech because of that bad blood that I mentioned earlier. So I've made it out to seem like this team doesn't really belong in the Sun Belt, but that isn't true at all. It's actually the opposite. They are a very prominent sports brand in the South and used to have a really good football program. The team is 645, 504, and 37 all time, with a winning percentage around 56%, which is actually really good for a Group of 6 program in the South, and would be the 6th best winning percentage of all time in the conference, behind Coastal, App State, Georgia Southern, JMU, Southern Miss, and Troy, but they've been playing football longer than any of those other teams have. They've also gone 8-5-1 in bowl games, and have won 25 conference titles. The problem is the Bulldogs haven't really been all that good lately, as they did go 10-3 and made the conference title game in 2019, but since then have gone 5-5, 3-9, 3-9, 3-9, and 5-8. Their last conference title was a WAC conference title back in 2011, and Sonny Cumbie is their current head coach, and he's gone 11-26 with the Bulldogs, but he did recently lead them to the Independence Bowl last season. Their last head coach, Skip Holtz, was actually one of the better coaches the Dogs have had in recent memory, as he coached in Ruston from 2013 to 2021, and would compile a 64-50 record while going 6-1 in bowl games and making the conference title 3 different times. But sadly, he was not able to win any of them. Before Coach Holtz, Louisiana Tech was led by current TCU head coach Sonny Dykes for 3 years, who went 22-15 with them and won their last WAC championship. Then we get into some really interesting territory because their last head coach before Coach Dykes was actually Derek Dooley. Coach Dooley coached the Bulldogs for 3 years from 2007 to 2009 after being on Nick Saban's coaching staff with the Dolphins, and he took them to a 17-20 record. But this was apparently good enough for Tennessee to hire him to be their head man in 2010, and Vols fans consider him to be one of the worst coaches they've had ever. Back before they joined the FBS though, they were really competitive members of the Southland and Gulf States conferences, which were both in the FCS, and they were in the Gulf State Conference from 1948 to 1970 and won 10 conference titles during that time, and then they were in the Southland from 1971 to 1987, and they won 8 titles there. This was all mostly done under 2 head coaches in Maxie Lambright and Joe Aylett, who their stadium is now named after. Some people might think this move isn't really a good one because of the fact that they're close to UL Monroe, and that they don't have a good program since Skip Holtz left, but this move is actually in line with some of the other moves that have happened recently, as in their recent expansions, they've targeted schools that were once FCS or Group of 5 powerhouses, but have since had a run of bad luck. They brought Georgia Southern up to the FBS after the Eagles started to have a few down years, and then they added Southern Miss from Conference USA, who's probably in their worst stretch ever right now. All of these teams have strong athletic brands and strong football histories though, so all it would take for them is to recapture some of their past performances, and the Sun Belt could have some of the best football programs in the Group of 6 all over again. Being in Louisiana too, all it would take would be for the Bulldogs to start competing in the conference, and they'd be able to recruit along some of the best teams in the conference as well. Without a doubt, the toughest part about this is that Louisiana is still the best team in the conference from the state, and is in a much better place than Louisiana Tech is. They have a new stadium that seats 40,000 people, and made a push to try and join the new Pac-12 instead of Texas State, which didn't end up coming to fruition. Louisiana Tech won't just come in and boss the Cajuns around, so there will be a pretty big rivalry in the conference from the get-go. What this is really about is providing another big-time Southern football program for the conference. That'll join the conference and help give them a leg up over the other ones around them. And honestly, when I think about it, I think this was done by the Sun Belt because they think that the Mountain West would have grabbed them if they didn't. It sounds kind of crazy, but it makes sense when you think about it. The Mountain West is still in desperate expansion mode, and they recently just added UTEP from Conference USA, so we know that the buyout there isn't all that crazy. But we also know that they just added Northern Illinois as a football-only member, and the Huskies are the easternmost team in the conference by almost 1,000 miles. Louisiana Tech isn't all that close to Northern Illinois, but they're also out east and could be as much of a travel partner as a team could be. On top of that, they're an established brand and a recruiting hotbed, and would be the only school in the conference located in Louisiana. Louisiana would be a much more valuable addition to the Mountain West than they would be to the Sun Belt. It makes sense. But in adding Louisiana Tech, the Sun Belt caps any eastern expansion by the Mountain West and will force them to add more FCS schools or New Mexico State, which aren't anywhere near as valuable as Louisiana Tech is. Tech becomes the 3rd team located in the state of Louisiana in the Sun Belt and is only a 30-minute drive away from UL Monroe Stadium, so they don't really add much in terms of geographic range or TV markets, but their proximity to the Warhawks could also be a plus. This is because Monroe's athletic department is widely known to be struggling and is even considering dropping out of the conference in all sports but football in order to keep operating costs down. That depends on whether or not you believe the rumors, but the addition of Louisiana Tech does seem to support it. The biggest realignment outcome that I honestly think will come from this is that Conference USA either now has to expand or it has to dissolve. They have too many schools now to dissolve since they're at 10, but with UTEP leaving for the Mountain West and now Tech leaving for the Sun Belt, half of their members weren't FBS teams just 5 years ago, with Sam Houston State, Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State, Missouri State, and Delaware all having joined the league from the FCS level in the last few years. Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee almost left for the MAC a few years ago, and that could be back on the table now that Northern Illinois has left. I know the chances of New Mexico State joining the Mountain West are low because of bad blood between them and New Mexico, but now the Mountain West could really kill Conference USA by adding them and maybe even Sam Houston State. The most likely target for Conference USA will be Tarleton State, which is in Texas, and was just a D2 school not all that long ago. It's honestly crazy to see how much Conference USA has collapsed over the last few years. But what do you guys think? If you're a Louisiana Tech fan, what do you think of this move? What conference realignment domino do you think will fall next? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.